I think it should be her real dad who walks her down the aisle. That's what she said. No warning. No apology. Just dropped it on me like she was reading off a grocery list. I didn't respond right away. I just blinked. Once. Twice. Then set down the spoon I was using to stir the damn chili I'd been cooking all afternoon. Homemade, her favorite, black bean and beef, spicy just the way Susan liked it. I even remembered the cornbread. Come again? I asked, not looking at her. Susan folded her arms, leaned against the counter like this wasn't the moment she was detonating 18 years of fatherhood. It's not personal, John. Emily just thinks, well, it's her wedding. She wants her biological father to give her away. I finally turned. The kitchen felt smaller than usual, tighter somehow. You mean Rick? The guy who vanished in 2006 and hasn't so much as mailed her a postcard. Susan sighed, that long exhale she always used when I was about to overreact. She's just curious. He's reconnected with her a little, and I cut in, keeping my voice low. Let me get this straight. I pay for the venue, the dress, the catering, the photographer, hell, I even fronted the down payment on their honeymoon cruise. But when it comes to the aisle, the one symbolic moment where I'd stand by the girl I raised, she picks the man who bailed before she lost her first baby tooth. Susan didn't answer. I knew that silence. I'd heard it in different forms over the years, when she defended Emily's bratty phases, when she made excuses for her freeloading brother, when she forgot our anniversary but meant well. It was the silence of someone who made a decision days ago and was only now informing me. She'd prefer you not attend, actually, she added, almost too quickly. Like she knew that was the part that would really cut. There it was. Not just a slap. A full backhand. Open palm, straight to the soul. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the chili. I didn't ask how the hell she could sit there in the house I rebuilt with my own hands, next to the cabinets I refinished the summer Emily left for college, and say that to my face like I was just a wallet with a pulse. Instead, I reached for the cabinet, pulled out a beer, warm, hadn't chilled them yet, and cracked it open. I took a long sip, staring at the backsplash tile I installed the year before. The one Emily helped me choose. I didn't ask why. I already knew. I'd seen the signs. Subtle ones. Her growing distance. The way she'd pause when I called her kiddo. How she'd flinch when someone asked, "Is that your dad?" And she'd just say, "He raised me." Like I was a foster parent with an expiration date. All right, I said finally. Susan blinked. What? I said all right. I repeated. Calm. Measured. Like a man who just realized the last page in the book was a punchline. And I meant it. Because right then, I understood something they didn't. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was clarity. They'd made their choice. Now I was going to make mine. The house was silent. That kind of silence that doesn't just fill the air, it presses down on you, thick and heavy. The kind of silence that lets you hear your own pulse when you're trying not to think. John sat in his study, a small converted garage space that smelled faintly of engine oil and cedar shavings. On the desk sat the wedding folder, Emily's wedding folder, once color-coded, now dog-eared and overstuffed. In it were invoices, receipts, fabric swatches, the kinds of things you collect when you're investing in someone else's dream. He opened his laptop and pulled up his email. Subject: final tuxedo fitting, confirmation required. The cursor blinked at him. He clicked reply. Please cancel my appointment. Something's come up. Regards. John M. That was the first cut. He closed the tab, then opened another. This one bookmarked years ago, never used. Kodiak Wilderness Charters. A week-long deep-sea fishing trip in Alaska, all-inclusive. Room, board, gear, and solitude. He had saved the link 5 years back, dreaming of a retirement trip he never took. He hovered over the Book Now button, paused, then clicked. 5 minutes later, his credit card number was punched in and the confirmation email dinged into his inbox. That was the second cut. Next, he opened his banking app. There was one last wire to complete, the wedding band. Platinum, $2,000, custom etched with "Forever starts today." Emily had picked the inscription. He stared at it a long while. Forever. Cute. He sighed and tapped send payment. That was the third cut. 3 clean, quiet slices. No yelling. No confrontations. No righteous speeches about betrayal. He was beyond all that. This wasn't a man walking away from his family. This was a man realizing he was never really in it. John reached under the desk and pulled out the tackle box. It hadn't seen daylight in years, tucked next to a pair of old steel-toe boots and a photo of Emily, age 12, holding her first trout. He looked at that photo for a long time. She'd had braces then, crooked bangs, too. Called him Dad, without a trace of hesitation. He placed it face down in the drawer. Then he stood, opened the closet, and pulled out his weatherproof duffel bag. Slowly, methodically, he packed thermal underwear, fleece, socks, gloves, his best pocket knife, a paperback copy of Old Man and the Sea, a small silver flask. He left the wedding invite on his desk. He didn't leave a note, didn't text, didn't knock on Susan's door. When the zipper closed and the duffel hit the floor with a soft thud, something in him sealed shut with it. By dawn, he'd be on a plane to Anchorage, then onward to Kodiak. He was done being the man who waited to be picked. Susan wore her favorite cream cardigan to book club that night, the one with pearl buttons and smug invincibility woven into the seams. She brought lemon bars store-bought, but transferred to her own plate so they'd seem homemade, and a bottle of Chardonnay she only dusted off for occasions. And tonight? Tonight was a victory lap. The women gathered in Marcy Delaney's sunroom, sipping, gossiping, pretending they'd all read the assigned memoir. But Susan couldn't wait. The smile tugged at her lips before the cork even popped. "How's wedding prep going?" Marcy asked, half listening, already fishing for something juicy. Susan set her glass down with theatrical restraint. "Oh, we've had a tiny change of plans." She let it sit for effect. Then, Emily decided she wants her biological father to walk her down the aisle. Gasps. Not shocked gasps, more the excited, gossipy kind. The kind that smell blood in the water. "Rick." One of them blinked. "Isn't he?" "I thought he was out of the picture." Susan shrugged, that rehearsed shrug that says I'm above drama, but if you insist. He reached out. They've reconnected. It's been healing for her. And John's okay with it, someone finally asked. Susan sipped her wine. Totally. He was surprisingly mature about it. Translation, he didn't scream, so I won. She didn't mention the way he stared at the backsplash after she said it, or the silence that followed like a dropped coffin. No, she rebranded as quiet as cooperation, made it palatable, digestible. Her narrative, polished and poured. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Emily was tweeting from the couch. "Can't believe it's happening. So thrilled my real dad will be giving me away, loudly crying face red heart, #blessed, #wedding week." The likes came fast. Cousins, old college friends, even a couple of her nursing school classmates chimed in. "OMG, this is beautiful. So glad you get this moment." Ring. Rick hadn't responded to her last message, or the one before that. In fact, the last real conversation they'd had was 3 months ago, when he commented on a Facebook picture of her and her fiancé. "You look so grown up." That was it. No follow-up. No calls. No plans. Still, she believed. Or wanted to. She built up this perfect moment in her head, her arm linked with the man who shared her blood, stepping out into the warm light of the ceremony while guests stood in admiration. Maybe he'd cry. Maybe she would too. She didn't ask herself what it would mean to walk past the empty seat where John would have sat. Didn't think about the fact that her real dad had never once been the one patching scraped knees or sitting through choir concerts in gymnasiums that smelled like sweat and hot dogs. That wasn't Rick. That was John. But narrative is a funny thing. You tell it enough times, you start to believe it. Susan believed hers, too, that John was fine, that she had been reasonable, that her daughter's choice was rooted in healing and not betrayal. She refilled her glass at book club and moved on to her thoughts about the memoir, some half-baked insight about forgiveness. And not once did it occur to her that the man she thought she dismissed quietly had vanished with more intention than she could comprehend. Because victory only feels sweet when you haven't realized what you've actually lost. The sun over Boulder was ruthless that day, bright, unforgiving, too cheery for how things were about to go. The ceremony was set up outdoors at a sprawling estate just outside the city. White folding chairs, roses lining the aisle. A string quartet rehearsed quietly under a canopy, their notes just slightly out of sync from nerves or heat. Guests filtered in slowly, dressed in pastel linens and overpriced shoes, dabbing their foreheads with programs that doubled as fans. Emily sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by mirrors and bridesmaids and curling irons, but her eyes were locked on the phone in her lap. One unread message. Not from him. Just a florist asking if she still needed extra boutonnieres. Relax, one of her bridesmaids cooed, mistaking her silence for jitters. You're glowing. Emily forced a tight smile. Her bouquet was already wilting at the edges, same as her confidence. She adjusted the hem of her custom dress, the one John had paid for, and looked toward the door, as if he might walk in with that familiar knock, holding a cup of coffee like he used to on school mornings. But there was only silence. And Susan, downstairs. Susan paced outside the main hall with her phone pressed tight to her ear, knuckles white. Voicemail. Again. Rick, it's Susan. Where are you? The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Emily's waiting. Everyone's waiting. Call me. She hung up, then called again. Voicemail. The event planner, trying her best to keep the machine running, approached. Is everything all right with the processional order? Susan plastered on a smile like a wax mask. Yes, just a slight delay. Her father's running a little behind. Should we delay the ceremony? No, Susan said quickly. No, he'll be here. But he wouldn't. She knew that somewhere in the pit of her gut. Knew it when she scrolled his Facebook the night before and realized his last post was about a poker tournament in Vegas. Knew it when he stopped answering texts 3 days ago. But she'd ignored that instinct, just like she'd ignored the last 18 years of actual fatherhood Emily received. In the crowd, murmurs had started. Quiet ones. Observations, really. Didn't she say her stepdad raised her? Where is he, anyway? I thought he funded the whole wedding. The string quartet began to play a soft rendition of Canon in D. Too early. Emily stood at the entrance of the garden, bouquet in trembling hands, staring at the long aisle she was supposed to walk down. Alone. Susan appeared beside her, lips tight. He's probably just stuck in traffic, she whispered. Emily didn't respond. Her eyes darted toward the horizon, as if maybe, just maybe, Rick would come barreling around the corner. Ty askew, arms open. Nothing. The guests began to turn in their seats, sensing the delay, their conversations pausing as they waited for something to happen. Anything. The officiant stepped forward slowly, glancing at Susan with a lifted brow. Shall we begin? Susan nodded too quickly. Emily didn't move. She looked down the aisle, then over her shoulder, then back at the crowd. There was no father waiting at the end. No John. No Rick. Just 150 pairs of eyes, all wondering the same thing. What the hell happened here? The facade hadn't shattered yet, but hairline cracks were spreading fast. The air was still, suffocating. Emily stood just beyond the trellis, still gripping the bouquet like it could anchor her to the moment. Bridesmaids whispered behind her, pretending not to see the panic rising behind her forced smile. Susan hovered like static, agitated, humming with denial, every inch of her screaming, "Keep it together." The guests had begun to check their watches. The officiant coughed politely and looked down at his script for the 4th time. The string quartet had transitioned to soft ambient noodling, trying not to betray the fact they were completely winging it now. And then Emily's phone buzzed. A single text. One line. Sorry, kid. Work emergency. Can't make it. No, love you. No, we'll make it up. Just that. Cold. Flat. Dismissive. Her breath hitched. She read it once. Then again. Like if she stared long enough, the words might rearrange themselves into something human. Susan saw her face fall. She didn't need to ask. What did he say? She whispered, eyes narrowing. Emily didn't answer. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't cry. Not yet. The body has this way of locking down the tears when there are too many people watching. Susan grabbed the phone from her hand. Read it. Froze. Then, without thinking, she hissed, "Unbelievable. That son of a..." Emily didn't flinch. She just stared down the aisle again, as if trying to spot John among the blur of faces. Some muscle memory in her heart still hoped maybe he'd come anyway. Maybe he'd be waiting there, arms open, eyes kind. But that aisle was still empty. And the man she'd chosen, her real dad, had bowed out with all the warmth of an automated email. Susan started to panic. We'll figure something out. Maybe Uncle Brent can walk you down. Or wait, what about your cousin Greg? Emily snapped. Greg's 15. Susan opened her mouth again, but shut it just as quickly. She was fumbling now, grasping at straws and fantasy fixes. Reality was clawing its way through her curated illusion, and it wasn't gentle. The crowd was restless. A guest in the back coughed, loud, deliberate. Another checked their phone and muttered, Jesus. One of the bridesmaids leaned in. You could just walk yourself down. Make it, like, an empowerment thing. Emily gave her a look that made her back off immediately. Empowerment wasn't the theme here. Disbelief was. Because for all her tweets about fairy tale moments and reconnections, for all Susan's smugness at book club and hand-waving away John's absence, none of it had made Rick show up. He was a ghost again, just like he'd always been. Only this time, he'd waited until the cameras were rolling. And now everyone saw it. Every single person sitting in those white folding chairs now knew that the man who raised her had been told to stay home, while the man who abandoned her hadn't even bothered to fake an excuse until the hour of the ceremony. Emily looked at the screen one more time, then locked the phone. Her hands shook. The bouquet trembled slightly. Dreams don't always shatter like glass. Sometimes they rot mid-bloom, slow and quiet, until they collapse in your hands. And there she stood, dressed in a $4,200 gown that John paid for alone in front of a crowd she wasn't ready to face. Not without a father. Not with that father. The whispers began like a soft breeze moving through the crowd, barely audible at first, then growing, layer by layer, like an unexpected gust threatening to lift the whole damn tent. I thought John raised her. He's not even here. Wait, isn't he the stepdad who funded all this? Didn't he build their deck last year by hand? It wasn't rage. It wasn't outrage. It was worse, confusion. That kind of hushed, uncomfortable curiosity that creeps in when people sense a lie wobbling on its heels. Susan sat in the second row, clutching her clutch with white knuckles, trying to look serene and proud and completely in control. But her left hand wouldn't stop trembling. She kept brushing at the hem of her dress, flicking imaginary lint that wasn't there, anything to occupy herself, so she didn't have to look at Emily. Because Emily was frozen at the start of the aisle, a bride with no escort, no motion, no plan B. 2 chairs down, Marcy Delaney leaned toward her husband, whispering, I remember when John used to pick Emily up from youth choir. Every single Sunday, rain or shine. He nodded slowly. Didn't he co-sign her student loans too? A third voice chimed in, some uncle from the groom's side. So where the hell is he? Susan heard it. She heard all of it, like echoes bouncing off the inside of a pressure cooker. She smiled. The kind of smile you paste on when you're 2 seconds from unraveling, like tissue stretched too tight. Her lips held, but her jaw clenched so hard it clicked. She wanted to stand, to say something, anything. Maybe throw out a line about how John had a prior engagement. Maybe invent a last-minute illness. Or a work emergency. Anything that didn't make her look like the woman who watched her husband disappear after 18 years of fatherhood and then let him stay gone. But that would mean acknowledging him. And acknowledging him now would mean admitting the choice they'd made. So she stayed quiet. And the murmurs grew. Emily's fiancé was off to the side, talking to the officiant in hushed tones, clearly stalling. The groom's mother was whispering to the maid of honor. Bridesmaids stood awkwardly in formation, unsure whether to stay posed or sit down. And Emily? She wasn't crying. She was staring straight ahead at the aisle, still clutching the bouquet like it was the only thing keeping her spine upright. Her eyes were wide, dry, unblinking, like someone waiting for the elevator doors to open and realizing they never will. One guest in the 4th row took out their phone and began typing, whispering to their neighbor, I swear, John's not here. That's wild. He was always around. Another chimed in. Can you imagine funding a wedding and being told not to come? That's ice cold. And karma? It had pulled up a chair. Because it wasn't just that Rick didn't show up. It was that everyone noticed. And now, the social equation was shifting in real time. The real dad had ghosted, the stepdad was gone, but not absent, and the entire room was doing the emotional math, out loud, in real time. Every glance, every whisper, Every subtle shake of the head was a crack forming under Susan's perfect narrative, and there was no way to plaster it back together without admitting what they'd done. And John wasn't there to witness it, but the world was. The music faded mid-note, like someone had cut the power. The quartet looked around nervously, unsure if they should stop or loop again. The officiant stepped forward and cleared his throat, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. His voice rang out across the seated crowd like a courtroom gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise." Chairs shifted. Programs were tucked away. Everyone stood. All eyes turned toward the entrance of the aisle, expectant, hopeful, totally unaware of what they were about to witness. Emily inhaled sharply. One deep, shaky breath. Then another. She stepped forward. Alone. The train of her gown dragged behind her like an anchor. Her heels tapped too loudly against the wood flooring beneath the carpet runner. And with every step she took, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressed harder into her skin. She reached the halfway point and paused, instinctively, waiting. That's where her father was supposed to join her. Rick in theory, John in truth. But there was no one. The wind picked up slightly, ruffling her veil like even the air itself was trying to flee this moment. From the front row, Susan stiffened. Her lips parted slightly as if to say something, anything, but no sound came out. She looked cornered, trapped in a social bear trap of her own design. Emily glanced sideways. Her face cracked. The officiant, confused but committed, finally asked the traditional question. Who gives this bride away? Silence. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Not even the rustling of dresses or suits. Just silence. Emily's mouth twitched. Her eyes darted to Susan, then to the groom, then to the guests, then back to the empty aisle behind her. Still nothing. No father stepping out to save the day. No hand reaching for hers. No second chance strolling out of the wings like a last-minute miracle. Her lip trembled. The officiant tried again, softer now. Who gives this bride away? Susan, in a moment of panic, opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Emily whispered, "No one." It came out barely audible, like the sound of something cracking internally. The officiant hesitated, then nodded, almost too respectfully, and gestured her forward. She took one more step, then another, but her pace slowed. Her eyes filled, her vision blurred. By the time she reached the altar, her hands were shaking so badly the bouquet was starting to come apart. One white rose fell to the ground. No one bent to pick it up. The groom touched her arm gently, unsure. She flinched. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was collapse. All the filtered selfies, the blessed hashtags, the curated version of her life she had pushed out into the world, none of it mattered now. Because in the one moment that was supposed to define love, legacy, and family, she stood utterly, painfully alone. No John. No Rick. Just the haunting echo of what could have been. What should have been. And the cold realization that sometimes, when you choose fantasy over loyalty, you end up with neither. The sun never really sets this far north, not in late June. It just hovers near the horizon like it's too lazy to sleep, casting a golden wash over the icy waters of the Gulf of Alaska. The air smells like salt and pine and something clean enough to sting. John stood near the edge of the charter boat, weathered hands gripping his fishing rod. His jacket was zipped halfway up, his cap pulled low. Beside him, the guide adjusted some gear, but didn't speak. They'd already talked enough that morning about halibut patterns, tides, tackle weight. Nothing personal, nothing emotional, just how John liked it. He cast his line out in a fluid motion, the spool singing briefly before it silenced into a clean, patient wait. The water rippled quietly, like it respected the man staring into it. In the corner of the deck, tucked beneath a spare tackle box and an old folded map, John's phone vibrated once. Then again. Then 3 times in a row. He didn't look. He knew what it was. He could practically hear Susan's voice in that first text. "John, please. Call me. Or Emily's. I was wrong. I need you. I messed up." But that phone? It might as well have been on the moon. He reached into the cooler instead, pulled out a beer, cracked it open with a hiss that echoed into the open sea. He took a long sip and exhaled, eyes fixed on the water. There was something holy about that silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of expectation. No one asking him to fix things. No one asking him to sacrifice. No one rebranding their betrayal as his fault for being too calm. Just the slow, rhythmic lapping of waves against fiberglass. John remembered the wedding date. He hadn't forgotten. He could picture it in his head like a movie playing for someone else. Guests fanning themselves in bolder heat. Emily clutching a bouquet. Susan pretending to have it all together. And he pictured the empty aisle. He smiled to himself. Not a bitter smile. Not cruel. Just free. He didn't feel angry. He didn't even feel vindicated. He felt done. 18 years of giving. Of showing up. Of being the steady presence they could always fall back on. And now, for once, he was choosing himself. Choosing the sea. The stillness. The taste of beer under a sun that never sleeps. The rod dipped slightly. A bite. He reeled slowly, steady, deliberate. Not rushing. Not chasing. When the fish finally breached, flapping and furious in the net, John laughed for the first time in weeks. Low and easy. His phone buzzed again behind him. He didn't even turn around. Because peace isn't something you find. It's something you stop giving away. By Sunday morning, Susan had lost her composure. What began as controlled concern on wedding day unraveled into open desperation. Her calls became erratic, 10 in the first hour, 5 more overnight. Each one going straight to voicemail. Each one sounding increasingly unlike the woman who once told her husband to sit this event out because it wasn't his moment. She paced the kitchen barefoot, hair in a frantic bun, makeup smudged from yesterday's half-hearted attempt at looking put together during the reception. The one that felt more like a eulogy. Emily hadn't come downstairs. She'd locked herself in the guest room after the after-party, still in her wedding dress when she collapsed face-first onto the guest bed. Susan had knocked. Twice. No response. At 8:47 a.m., Susan called again. Voicemail. She called from the house phone. Then from her brother's phone. Then from her old work line. Still nothing. She opened her messages. The screen was a graveyard of sent texts. Blue bubbles stacked like dominoes, every one of them unread. John, I know we hurt you. Please call. Emily's not okay. She hasn't said a word since the ceremony. I panicked. I was wrong. I didn't mean what I said. Please, just let us hear your voice. You were right about Rick. We messed up. She's asking for you. I'm asking for you. By noon, Emily finally emerged, barefoot and blotchy-faced, still wearing the diamond earrings John had gifted her for her nursing school graduation. She sat down at the kitchen table like someone attending her own sentencing. Susan poured her a cup of coffee, hands shaking slightly. He's not answering, she said quietly. Emily nodded. I know. She reached for her phone, opened it to her messages, scrolled past hundreds of wedding texts and Instagram tags and congratulations posts. Found the last thread with John. The last thing she ever sent him, 2 weeks ago. I think it'll mean a lot to have my real dad there. She stared at it, thumb hovering. Typed. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. You were always my dad. Always. I made a mistake. Please come home. Send. She waited. Nothing. A single checkmark. No, read. No reply. She tried again. A voice note this time. Her voice cracked midway through. I didn't mean to push you out. I was stupid. I thought. I don't even know what I thought. I'm so sorry. You were there every single day. I need you. I need you. She had sinned. Set the phone down. Watched the screen like it owed her a miracle. It just sat there, dark and silent. Susan pulled her cardigan tight and whispered, more to herself than anyone. He always answers. But not this time. Because when a man learns the difference between being needed and being used, he stops picking up. John sat on the dock behind the cabin he'd rented outside Kodiak. The tide was out, revealing slick black rocks and the skeletons of old crab traps tangled in seaweed. A raven caught somewhere behind him, a slow, echoing croak that sounded more amused than ominous. In his lap, the phone buzzed again, low, persistent, pitiful. He ignored it. He was whittling. Not for any real purpose, just shaping down a driftwood stick with a small blade he'd carried in his pocket for years. The motions were mindless, meditative, the kind of quiet repetition that held back the impulse to feel too much all at once. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him. He set down the stick and flipped the phone over. 16 missed calls. 9 new messages. The last one from Emily just 20 minutes ago. I was wrong, Dad. I'm so sorry. Please come home. He read it once. Then again. Dad. That word hung there like a trick. She hadn't called him that in years. Not sincerely. Not without the implied asterisk. Step, not real, stand-in. Now it was supposed to patch the hole she dug? He could almost hear the voice note beneath it. Desperate, cracking, probably filmed from the guest room she sulked in. Or maybe the kitchen. The same kitchen where Susan had once stood in front of him and said she prefers her real dad. He stared at the message longer than he meant to. Not because it moved him. Because it didn't. There was no spark of warmth. No aching desire to forgive. No welling up of paternal instinct. Just stillness. Like watching a movie scene you've already seen too many times, knowing the ending, knowing the disappointment, knowing that no matter how heartfelt the monologue, the damage is already done. John let the message sit there another 10 seconds. Then his thumb hovered. One flick. Deleted. No reply. No draft. No second thoughts. He scrolled through the rest. Susan's texts were longer. Apologetic. Panicked. John, I should have never said what I said. I was trying to protect her moment. I didn't mean to erase you. We were wrong. Please let us talk. Please. He didn't delete those. He just closed the app. He set the phone back down face first, letting the sun warm the back of it until it dimmed and shut itself off. He went back to whittling. Because the truth had finally crystallized, not in her apology, not in Susan's regret, not in the sound of that word Dad typed too late. It had crystallized in her choice. They didn't just push him out. They replaced him. And now they were realizing the substitute never showed up. Too bad. Some messes don't get cleaned. Some moments don't get do-overs. And some fathers? They don't come back just because you finally realize they were the real thing all along. The internet never sleeps, and it has a taste for blood when it smells hypocrisy. It started as a throwaway post on a local Boulder subreddit. Posted by u/VenueVet89. Attended a wedding this weekend where the bride's stepdad, who raised her from age 5 and paid for everything, was not even invited. She chose her real dad to walk her down the aisle. He bailed. Left her standing there. Haven't stopped thinking about it. A photo was attached. Blurry, shot from the second row. Emily standing alone at the head of the aisle, bouquet trembling, eyes glassy. No father. No motion. Just the raw, uncut awkwardness of a moment gone painfully wrong. The comments exploded within the hour. Wait, the guy who paid for the whole thing wasn't even allowed to attend? Imagine raising someone your whole life and getting replaced last minute. Brutal. Ungrateful doesn't even begin to cover this. This is exactly why some men go fishing in Alaska and never come back. And then came the viral versions. Screenshots on Twitter. TikTok explainer videos with dramatic music. Reaction channels dissecting it like a true crime podcast. Someone on Facebook even posted a thread titled, "The father who showed up for 18 years and was ghosted at the altar." The replies were merciless. Heartless doesn't even scratch the surface. This is emotional theft. Plain and simple. She doesn't deserve to call him dad now. Not when it's convenient. I hope he never answers a single one of their texts. Susan first heard about it from Marcy. A gentle, rattled phone call. Have you seen Reddit? Susan didn't even use Reddit. But she clicked the link Marcy texted her and watched the story unfold in real time. The post had 38,000 upvotes. Then 41,000. Then 63,000. A BuzzFeed article followed. Bride chooses bio dad over stepfather who raised her. Internet explodes. She scrolled through the comments. Some were vicious. I hope that stepdad lives the rest of his life fishing in peace. The mom's just as bad. Imagine letting your husband get replaced like a suit jacket. Others were more cutting in their restraint. He was never a placeholder. He was the whole damn structure. You don't realize what kind of man you had until he's gone and unreachable. Susan closed the app. Emily was still in the guest room. Her phone long dead. Her wedding makeup still smudged in streaks under her eyes, like ghost marks from a ceremony that felt less like a celebration and more like a live-streamed regret. By evening, even distant relatives had texted. Is it true? Why didn't John walk her down? Why wasn't he there? The real question, buried under all the noise, was the one Susan couldn't outrun. What made you think he'd stay loyal when you made it clear he was optional? What they hadn't understood, what everyone online understood immediately, was that love like John's doesn't survive erasure. It disappears quietly. Then it lets the silence do the talking. 3 weeks passed. Denver had cooled a bit by then. August losing its grip, the mornings sharper, the light more golden than blinding. Life kept moving. Cars still crowded I-25. Lawns still got watered. But for Susan, everything had slowed to a crawl. Emily had returned to her condo with swollen eyes and a wedding album she didn't want to open. The photos told a sanitized version of the day. Her standing alone, bouquet centered, lips pulled into a strained half-smile. They'd skipped ordering prints. The buzz around the stepdad story faded, as viral things do, but it didn't vanish. It lingered in whispers at the grocery store, stares at the gym. A woman at the pharmacy muttered, "Shame what they did to that man," loud enough for Susan to hear. She said nothing. She couldn't. Then, one Thursday morning, it happened. Susan walked into the local hardware store, a list in her hand. Spackle, wood glue, a replacement bulb for the back porch. She was halfway down aisle 6 when she looked up and saw him. John. Tanned. Calm. 10 pounds lighter. Wearing an old flannel, jeans, and a beat-up baseball cap she didn't recognize. He looked good. Not healed exactly, but finished. Like someone who had laid down a burden that was never his to carry in the first place. For a second, she froze. Then, like a reflex, "John, wait." He turned his head. Their eyes met. Susan's lips parted. Her hand twitched slightly at her side, like she might reach for him, like maybe she'd blurt something rehearsed but desperate. "I'm sorry. You were right. She misses you." But before she could speak, John did something simpler. He smiled. Not wide, not bitter, just enough to say, "I see you, and I'm free now." Then he turned, quietly, deliberately, and walked away. No accusations. No grand monologue. No need to explain himself to the woman who watched him be erased, helped erase him, and only looked for him after the fantasy collapsed. Susan stood there in that fluorescent-lit aisle, next to garden shears and rusted screwdrivers, holding her shopping list like it could still give her purpose. But it couldn't, because John's silence wasn't absence anymore. It was presence. It was everything she never gave him. The last word, the final choice, the dignity of walking away without needing to be seen. That was his triumph. Not revenge. Not payback. Just a man who finally stopped asking for a seat at a table where they'd long since taken away his chair, and walked out into a life that no longer asked for permission. She came down the stairs barefoot, holding 2 swimsuits, one red, one the kind that looks like it's made of dental floss, and asked which made her look more like she's over him. I didn't ask who him was. Dana stood in front of the mirror, twisting at the hip like she was auditioning for someone who wasn't me. Eli's name hadn't come up for months. Not since that wine-fueled dinner party where he called me reliable, like a Volvo. Dana had laughed so hard she spilled her Pinot on the rug I paid to clean. Now, here she was again, brushing that same shade of lipstick she wore when we first met, only slower, more deliberate. Her voice floated over her shoulder like a feather dipped in acid. "Don't wait up too late while I'm gone. You've got your crossword puzzles and oatmeal, right?" I didn't blink. I just folded the paper I wasn't reading and said it clean, emotionless, the way you read a weather report. "If you go on that trip with him, I'm out." She froze for a second. Not long. Just long enough for her reflection to catch up with her ego. Then she turned around, that little smirk already crawling up the corner of her mouth. "Oh, please, Marcus. You're not the dramatic type." I nodded. Exactly. She didn't understand then. Probably thought I was posturing, one of those empty threats men make when they're cornered by their own silence. But she forgot the one thing I never stopped being: patient. Dana thought my stillness was weakness. She never realized it was containment. She twirled her hair again, like she always did when she wanted to dismiss something without looking like she cared. "I need a break. From all of this. I need to breathe. You don't want me resenting you, do you?" I looked at her for what felt like the first time in years. Not the curated version she posted on Instagram. Not the woman I walked down an aisle with. The real Dana. Veins just under the surface. A little twitch in her cheek when she was bluffing. And that fake lightness in her voice when she was buying time. "You already resent me," I said. "But you won't after this." She laughed, louder than necessary. "You gonna divorce me because I'm going to a beach with an old friend?" "No. I'm going to walk away. You can keep calling it friendship. Just don't expect me to keep calling this a marriage." She shook her head, grabbing her phone off the counter and pretending to text someone. Probably Eli. Probably sending a message like, "Guess what Grandpa just said?" I didn't care. Not anymore. I had rehearsed that line for 6 months. Practiced it on drives to the grocery store, whispered it while shaving. "If you go, I'm out." Not yelled. Not pleaded. Not sobbed. Just delivered. The power wasn't in the threat. It was in the absence of negotiation. And maybe that's what startled her. The stillness. The absence of begging. The way I didn't follow her up the stairs or ask what time her flight was. I just went to the kitchen, made myself a coffee, and watched the steam rise like I was witnessing a cremation. Quiet. Controlled. Final. That night, she packed fast. She blasted music in the bedroom like a teenager trying to rewrite the mood. "Eli says it's gonna rain," she yelled, half laughing. "Guess I'll have to wear less." I didn't answer. I wasn't in the mood to compete with ghost laughter from a man who thought my quiet made me invisible. Eli wouldn't recognize a storm until it pulled his roof off. Next morning, she walked past me in her airport athleisure, dragging a pink roller bag I bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She stopped at the door like she wanted me to stop her. Instead, I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a folded slip of paper, and placed it gently on the counter. She didn't even look at it. Just scoffed, "I'll text you when I land." I didn't nod, didn't blink. I just looked her in the eye and said, "No need." The front door clicked shut behind her like the last sentence of a book neither of us were brave enough to finish. She didn't look back, just tossed me a half smile over her shoulder, like we were still playing house, like this was just another round of her theater. The kind of smile that says you'll be here when I get back, because you always are. She didn't notice I hadn't made coffee, that the crossword wasn't open, that I wasn't even sitting. I was waiting. As her Uber purred away from the curb, I stood motionless by the window, watched her disappear into someone else's weekend. She looked like freedom. Aviators, yoga pants, earbuds in, already curating her first photo caption. Probably something self-congratulatory. "Sip in peace," or "reset mode." On. Something rehearsed. Once the taillights vanished, I walked to my study. Second drawer. Left side. Beneath the useless warranties and old insurance policies. The envelope was still there. Still sealed. Plan D printed in block letters across the front. Not Plan A. That was marriage. Plan B had died in couples therapy when Dana said, "I just don't think emotional loyalty is sustainable." Plan C had been silence. Now, we were here. Plan D wasn't a tantrum. It was an architecture. Layers of documents, contingencies, timing protocols. Not to punish her, but to uncouple, efficiently, quietly, strategically. The envelope contained the full trust restructure, finalized months ago but not yet filed. A quitclaim deed transfer for the beach house she never asked about. A new lease agreement, pre-signed by a tenant I had vetted for over a year. A letter addressed to Clark and Wynn law offices with only one line underlined, "Initiate effective immediately." I took it out, smoothed it on the desk, and looked at my hands. Steady. No tremor. Not even a flutter in my chest. Then I picked up the phone. First call went to Gregory Wynn. 6 rings. He answered with the usual dry tone that said he was mid-chess match or divorce court. Same energy. "Proceed," I said. He paused. "Today? She's airborne." Click. That was it. No explanation needed. The man's retainer had been quietly bleeding my account for over a year in preparation for this exact call. No billable hours wasted on pep talks. Second call. Rachel. My niece. Our only regular house guest. Dana barely tolerated her, always calling her quiet and a little judge why. That's because Rachel actually noticed things. Like which side of the bed Dana started sleeping on when she stopped touching me. Like the 6 new outfits Dana bought after bumping into Eli at that dumb art gala. "Is it time?" Rachel asked. I smiled, the first real one in weeks. "Yeah, you good to meet Anna. Already on the way. He's where you said they'd be. In the kitchen. Hooked by the stove. All right. I'll stay until she's settled." We hung up. I returned to the envelope. Slid it into the FedEx packet already addressed and prepaid. Walked it to the door. No drama. Just logistics. As I sealed the flap, I caught a glimpse of Dana's handwriting on a post-it near the fridge. "Pick up almond milk," smiley face, with a heart she'd drawn too perfectly, like it was part of a brand campaign. I didn't remove it. Let the heart sit there like an artifact. The last relic of a woman who believed I'd never move, never act, never leave. Because I didn't shout. Because I didn't throw plates or scroll through her phone at 2 a.m. But while she was sipping cocktails with Eli, letting him put sunscreen on her back like it meant nothing, I was sending the final paperwork of a life she no longer belonged to. She packed for the beach. I packed her exit. 3 days in. No calls. No texts. No fake, just checking in messages from Dana. Not even one of those passive-aggressive selfies women send when they want to look like they're glowing without asking if you're looking. Instead, it came from my sister. Text message. No greeting. No emojis. Just, "You okay?" Attached was the photo. At first glance, it was what you'd expect from a woman in a fresh rebellion. Dana in a neon bikini, holding a plastic pineapple cup, half turned toward the camera, half twisted toward someone just out of frame. Her hip popped like she was modeling for people who were supposed to regret her. But it wasn't the pose that caught me, or the drink, or the fact that Eli was behind her, shirtless, leaning in with the same smug half-grin he wore the night he called me dependable, like airport Wi-Fi. No, it was the caption, "Cheers to never settling." I didn't react right away. My sister probably expected anger, shock, some emotionally wounded emoji barrage. Instead, I stared at it like a puzzle. Let the silence in the room stretch. Then I tilted my head and zoomed in. Her sunglasses. Mirrored aviators. Bright, obnoxious, the kind influencers wear to hide how empty their eyes are. And in that reflection, barely visible, was a table. Not a poolside lounge table. No umbrella. No beach towels. It was a restaurant. White linen. Candles. 2 wine glasses. And a man's hand resting on hers. Not Eli's. The watch on his wrist was different. Silver face. Black band. Eli wore that gaudy smartwatch with a cracked screen. The one he kept tapping like it owed him money. This man's hand was older. Tanned. Confident posture. And her fingers weren't just resting. They were curled toward his palm. I pinched and zoomed until the pixels gave way. There, in the corner of the table, a bottle of Chateau Margaux. $600 a pop. Dana doesn't drink red. So this wasn't just a beach brunch with Eli the safe friend. This was a dinner. A real one. Intimate. Candlelit. With someone who wasn't supposed to exist. A third party to her alibi. And she had posted it like a trophy, never realizing that arrogance turns every detail into evidence. I set the phone down. No anger. Just detachment. She thought the bikini would hurt me. She thought the caption would sting. She thought Eli was the poison. But Eli? Eli was a distraction. The real betrayal was always her pride. The part of her that wanted to be seen winning, even when she had to manufacture the scoreboard. My phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. Short message. Anna settled in. Curtains up. Keys duplicated. You're good. I texted back one word. Perfect. Then I returned to the photo. This time, not to inspect her, but to appreciate it for what it was. A snapshot of someone who had just given me full permission. She wanted to burn the bridge. Fine. She just forgot I built the whole damn town around it. The apartment was never supposed to matter. We bought it 7 years ago, back when Dana still talked about investing in something low risk. She called it her bored housewife fund. Said it gave her something to brag about during brunch without needing to actually lift a finger. But after the paperwork was signed, she never set foot in it again. Not once. Never asked about tenants. Never saw the new floors I had installed. Never noticed when the mortgage was quietly paid off. She had no idea that by the time she was posing in pool chairs with men who weren't her husband, this place had already become something else entirely. An exit strategy. I pulled into the back alley behind the unit, clean, quiet, discreet. The kind of place no one posts on Instagram, but everyone remembers when life turns sideways. The windows were spotless. The new curtains drawn. There was no damage to repair, no memories to erase. Just blank walls and fresh paint. A clean slate. A stage. Anna was already there. She stood by the door, dressed in tailored slacks, a cream sweater, and a scarf tied like she meant business but didn't need to prove it. She didn't look rushed or curious. She looked like someone who had lived through enough nonsense to know better than to ask too many questions. "Marcus," she said. I nodded and handed her the keys. She didn't fumble or pretend to be surprised. Just slid them onto her ring with a soft clink, like she'd already lived here in her mind a dozen times. I've left the lease agreement on the counter, I said. Initials on the last page, signature at the bottom. She followed me in. Everything inside was ready. The living room was staged subtly, nothing flashy. A coffee table with a hardcover book about landscapes. A single orchid by the window. The kind of apartment that looked lived in without ever really feeling like home. The kind people drive past and never wonder about. Perfect. Anna walked through each room silently. She wasn't trying to be polite. She was measuring, testing the echo, checking the angles. When she returned to the living room, she picked up the pen and signed. "Do you want a deposit?" she asked. "No," I replied. "The rent's token. The lease is binding. That's what matters." She gave me a curious look, but didn't press. That's why I chose her. Anna came recommended by someone who understood discretion. She had no criminal record, no messy history, no ties to Dana's world. A former real estate executive who'd walked away from her last firm the moment it went public. Retired early. Widowed. No kids. Liked quiet things. I walked her to the door. Before she stepped out, I said, "It's yours now. Just don't mention me to anyone." She smiled. Not warm. Not cold. Just enough to say understood. "Silent as Sunday," she replied. The door closed softly behind her. No click. No drama. Back in my car, I opened the glove box. Took out a small envelope. Inside were 3 photos, one of Dana on the beach, one of the sunglasses reflection, and one of Eli standing too close with his hand on her hip at some tacky pool bar. None of them angry. None even overtly sexual. Just careless. I placed the envelope in the center console. Not as evidence. As a reminder. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. Dana had chosen the stage. I just made sure the audience was watching the right act. And Anna? She was the first cue. The moment her plane touched down, Dana's fingers were already moving. Landed. "Want to grab dinner?" Sent with a sunglasses emoji and a winking face. Her usual cocktail of fake chill and anticipation. She probably thought I'd fold the second she came back, like I'd been pacing the living room in robe and slippers, whispering her name into an empty wine glass. She waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Still no reply. Tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Her lips curled slightly. "He's pouting," she muttered, already scrolling Instagram for something to distract herself. Maybe she thought I'd come to pick her up. That I'd be there at arrivals with some placating smile, ready to say, "Let's talk about this like adults." That's how she rewrote our arguments. Like they were always just misunderstandings that got too emotional. But as she slid into the back of a rideshare with her overstuffed pink roller bag, reality didn't hit her yet. Not when she passed the bookstore we used to visit. Not when she turned onto our street. Not even when the driver paused outside our front gate. It hit when the key didn't turn. She jiggled the lock. Once. Twice. Then shoved harder, like the house was playing games. The door didn't budge. Her face twisted, annoyance first. Not fear. Not yet. She stepped back and tried the garage keypad. Hit the numbers, 0-9-8-3. That familiar tone. Denied. Again. Denied. Again. Nothing. She stared at the keypad like it owed her an explanation. Dana fumbled through her purse, pulled out her phone, and called me again. Straight to voicemail. "Marcus, seriously?" she said into the air, pacing in front of her own house like a stranger. "This isn't funny." She hit redial. Nothing. For the next 30 minutes, she made a circuit around the front porch like a woman in denial, checking under mats, tapping windows, peering in like she might see her reflection behaving better. Her frustration morphed into quiet panic, but still masked under entitlement. That's when she tried Rachel. It rang twice. Rachel picked up. Cool. Dry. Familiar enough to be polite, distant enough to be noticed. "Rachel." Dana exhaled. "Thank God. I can't get in the house. Did Marcus say anything to you? Like, is he just trying to make a point?" A pause. "You should talk to the new tenant." Dana blinked. "What?" "I'm not supposed to say much. But if you want to get inside that house, you'll need her permission." Dana scoffed. Her? Who the hell is her?" Another pause. "You'll see." Click. The silence after that wasn't just quiet. It was active. Loud in its absence. Dana stared at the phone like it had betrayed her. The front yard, the shutters, the porch swing, It all looked the same. But something underneath had shifted. A layer she didn't know existed had slid away, revealing something colder. She tried peeking through the living room window. Curtains. New ones. Not the beige linen she had picked out during her modern farmhouse phase. These were heavier. Ivory. Neatly pressed. Elegant. Nothing Dana would have chosen. And that alone told her more than she wanted to know. The doorbell was now her only option. And even that felt foreign. Like she was pressing it at someone else's house. So she did. Twice. Then 3 times. And waited. No footsteps. No familiar creak on the floorboards. Just a single flicker of movement behind the curtain. A shadow. A shape. A presence. She stepped back instinctively. Her stomach flipped. And for the first time since that bikini photo, Dana realized she hadn't just pushed a boundary. She'd been erased from it. Dana showed up at her sister's place, still pretending nothing was wrong. "I think Marcus changed the locks to teach me a lesson," she said, dropping her designer bag by the entryway like a teenager home from college. "He's being petty. Classic overcorrection. He'll cool off." Her sister, Mia, didn't say much. Just nodded and handed her a stack of forwarded mail. Dana flipped through it like it was junk. Department store catalogs. A credit card offer. One thick envelope, marked private and confidential, caught her eye. The return address, Clark and Wynn Law Offices. Her fingers hesitated. It wasn't panic. Not yet. Just a twinge of curiosity edged with something more brittle. Marcus never used lawyers casually. He was the kind of man who thought legal action was for people who couldn't plan. And Clark and Wynn, that was the firm he'd referenced. Once, when they were doing estate paperwork. She remembered the name only because Dana had joked it sounded like an overpriced watch brand. She sat on the couch, tore it open. Inside, a 5-page letter. Heavy paper, the kind with a watermark. Real money paper. She scanned the first few lines, her eyes stumbling over the sterile legal tone like they were tripping on marble. "Dear Mrs. Locke, pursuant to the restructuring of the Locke Family Property Trust, this notice serves to inform you that, effective immediately, the lease agreement associated with the residential property at 42 Wisteria Lane has been terminated." Her eyes kept moving, but slower now. "In accordance with the stipulations agreed upon in the original trust, which was filed under a non-marital status clause, all property and rights retained therein shall revert exclusively to the sole trustee, Marcus J. Locke." She sat up straighter. All rights revoked due to non-marital trust restructuring. Dated 1 week before her trip. Her mouth parted, silent. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, her thoughts outran her ego. She flipped to the next page. A full property transfer deed. Not pending, filed. Not proposed, executed. Witnessed. Notarized. 3rd page. An itemized inventory list of everything she had assumed still belonged to her. The house. The second apartment she never asked about. The shared bank account, reassigned. A postmarital clause she'd signed years ago without reading closely, thinking it was just something their accountant needed in case of estate taxes. Clause 7b. Trustee reserves the right to restructure holdings upon evidence of extramarital affiliation, breach of fiduciary confidence, or abandonment of residence for more than 48 hours without notice. She dropped the packet like it had burned her. Abandonment. 48 hours. She'd been gone 6 days. Her phone was already in her hand before she realized she didn't know who she was dialing for. Marcus wouldn't pick up. Rachel wouldn't say more. Her sister was pretending to fold laundry in the next room, but Dana could feel the judgment vibrating through the walls. She scrolled back to her own Instagram post, the bikini one. The caption, "Cheers to never settling." Now, it read like a suicide note in disguise. The room spun slightly. Dana stood up too fast and caught herself on the edge of the couch. Her heart was pounding, not from rage, not from betrayal, but from something worse. Certainty. She hadn't been punished. She'd been replaced. And it wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Dana didn't plan the drive. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't even sane. She just had to see. Something. Anything. A crack in the armor. A detail out of place. Some undeniable glitch in Marcus's calm little coup. She needed proof that this wasn't real. That this was temporary. That he was bluffing harder than she had. The street was the same. Too much so. The neighbors' cars still lined the curb. The old oak still dropped leaves across their driveway like a yearly joke they never found funny. Even the porch lights on the McCullen house still flickered. Dana thought that would be comforting. It wasn't. It felt like time had kept moving without her. She parked a few houses down, not out of caution, but shame. A sick instinct she didn't want to admit. She wasn't arriving home. She was approaching something. Like a guest. Or worse, a stranger. From the driver's seat, she stared at the house for a full minute. And then she saw it. A movement. Slight. Barely there. The curtain in the front window shifted. Not pulled. Not flung open. Just tilted, enough to signal someone was watching. Measuring. Deciding. And then she saw her. The face. Mid-50s. Poised. Pale blouse. Hair pulled back in that I'm not trying, but I know exactly how I look way that Dana used to fake but never quite pulled off. Elegant. That was the word. Not pretty. Not hot. Not even beautiful. Elegant. It hit her like a slap. Dana flung the car door open with too much force, striding toward the front steps like the pavement owed her something. Her heels clicked like accusations. Her breath fast and shallow, rehearsing some indignant opening line that would put this whole thing back in her control. She reached the door, fist clenched, ready to pound. It opened before she touched it. Anna stood there, composed, not smug, not apologetic, just there, like she belonged, like she'd been living in this house for years instead of 3 days. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth, with the faintest edge of curiosity. Polite, professional. Lethal. Dana blinked. The script evaporated. "That's my house." Anna's head tilted slightly, like she was observing a lost tourist. Then she smiled. Small. Real. Was. One word. No venom. No sarcasm. Just precision. Dana's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She glanced past Anna's shoulder, trying to find something familiar. The hallway rug was gone. The coat rack was gone. The mirror she bought from that overpriced boutique in Denver? Gone. In its place, a large canvas print of a mountain lake. Still. Neutral. Clean. Anna didn't move. Didn't offer her the threshold. She just stood. Dana tried again. "Marcus." He didn't say anything. He can't just. Anna nodded once, slowly. "Everything filed. Notarized. I have the lease. Would you like to see it?" Dana's lips twitched. "I don't need to see anything." Anna shrugged. "Suit yourself." And then, just like that, she closed the door. Gently. No slam. No flourish. Like she was sealing off the past. Dana stood there, fist balled, eyes hot, face burning. She wasn't just locked out. She'd been replaced by someone who didn't even need to try. No affair. No drama. No trashy soap opera twist. Just erasure. Quiet. Elegant. Complete. Dana picked the restaurant carefully. Not one of the flashy downtown rooftop joints with Instagrammable cocktails and velvet banquettes. No, this was calculated nostalgia, a quiet Italian place they used to visit back when things felt solid. White tablecloths, heavy silverware, real candles. The kind of place that whispered reconciliation. She booked a table for 6. Even included his sister. And Rachel. She thought it would send a signal, "I'm still your wife. I still wear the last name." As if a table reservation and overpriced red sauce could rebuild what she bulldozed with a bikini pic and a caption about never settling. Still, she got dressed like she was going to win something. Soft curls. Diamond studs he gave her for their 10th anniversary. A muted silk dress that said, "I'm stable, I'm mature, I'm ready to talk." Not the beach glam Dana that Eli encouraged. This was the version of herself she thought Marcus wanted back. When she arrived, the hostess smiled and led her to the corner booth with 6 chairs and too much optimism. Time passed. First 15 minutes, just nerves. She checked her phone 3 times. No new messages. She even sent Rachel a text. Running late. No reply. At the 30-minute mark, she tried Marcus. Again. Straight to voicemail. The waiter hovered, pity in his posture. "Would you like to order a drink?" "Not yet," Dana said, swallowing the humiliation. "Just waiting on a few." He nodded, disappeared. She looked around the restaurant. No familiar faces. No one walking in. Just strangers laughing at their own inside jokes while her night caved in one breath at a time. 45 minutes in, the waiter returned. Only this time, he wasn't empty-handed. He placed a chilled bottle of wine on the table in Italian red, her favorite. One she and Marcus used to share after good arguments, when they both agreed to stop talking and just sip until the silence became forgiveness. Dana blinked. I didn't order that. The waiter gave a polite smile and handed her a small cream-colored envelope. Thick paper. Sharp fold. Classy. She opened it with a finger that trembled more than she liked. Inside. Congratulations on starting over. A former tenant. Her breath caught. She looked at the label on the wine bottle. A vintage from the year they bought the house. One Marcus had hunted down for months back then, saying, if we're going to age together, might as well drink something that knows how. Dana stared at it like it was radioactive. The waiter, still lingering, added, it was dropped off earlier today with instructions to deliver at the 1-hour mark. You're free to keep the table as long as you like. She nodded, her throat dry. Thanks. As he walked away, the couple at the next table whispered. She knew they recognized her. The dress, the silence, the empty chairs, it was all too loud. Dana sat there for another 10 minutes. No one came. Not Marcus. Not Rachel. Not even Mia. She poured herself a glass of the wine. It tasted like ash. Not because it was bad, but because it was chosen without her. Tailored to her taste, delivered on cue, wrapped in the kind of message that made her realize. She wasn't being punished. She was being dismissed. With style. With timing. With the kind of cruelty that wears silk gloves. Mocked not by rage, but by precision. The wine sat unopened on the kitchen counter of her sister's guest house. Dana hadn't touched it since the dinner. Couldn't. It looked like it was still smirking at her, taunting her with curated memories and the cruel elegance of someone who knew exactly how to leave a mark without ever raising their voice. Now, it was 2:43 a.m., and she was wrapped in a robe that wasn't hers, on a couch that wasn't hers, in a house that wasn't hers. The glow from her phone was the only light in the room. Everything else was shadows. She scrolled with trembling fingers. Eli's Instagram. Nothing. Well, not nothing. Just nothing of her. No photos. No tags. No cheeky captions. No sun-drenched grins where she's throwing up a peace sign like she's 25 again. Not even a blurry side shot. Instead, there was her. Not Dana, her. Some brunette in a black one-piece with legs for days and a knowing smile. Tagged at a rooftop bar in Cabo. Holding the same pineapple cocktail Dana had posted 3 days earlier. Except this one looked like she wasn't pretending. Caption. Some people get better with every flight. Smirking face airplane tropical drink. Dana zoomed in. His arm was around the brunette's waist. Not playfully. Possessively. Her stomach churned. She backed out. Checked the date. The photo was posted 8 hours ago. They were still there. Together. While Dana was sitting in borrowed silence with an inbox full of absence. She fired off a text to Eli. Seriously? WTF is that? No reply. She waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 3. Typed another. Was any of that real? Or was I just your placeholder? Still nothing. She switched apps. Opened her photo gallery. Scrolled through the vacation pics she had taken, each more performative than the last. Dana in sunglasses. Dana by the pool. Dana with the caption she thought would sting. Cheers to never settling. Now the words echoed like a taunt from her past self. She whispered them out loud. Mocked her own voice. Tried to laugh. Couldn't. Because settling? Settling would have been safety. Settling would have meant the man who made coffee without being asked. Who always parked her car facing out so she wouldn't have to reverse. Who remembered her mom's birthday even when she didn't. Marcus wasn't the punishment. He was the shelter she burned down to feel wanted. And Eli? He was a vacation. She tapped back to the wine photo. The envelope. Congratulations on starting over. A former tenant. Dana never noticed how cold those words were until now. Not because they were cruel, but because they were precise. Final. She looked around the room. No framed photos. No flowers. No warmth. Her sister's space was clean, but sterile. Meant for temporary things. And Dana had become just that, an overnight guest in every chapter of her own life. She checked her phone again. Still nothing from Eli. Still no reply from Marcus. Just a blank screen. And her own caption, frozen in the feed. Life's too short to settle. She whispered it again, softer this time. And then let the silence answer. Because nothing answered louder than being forgotten. The air was heavier that morning. Not weather. Not season. It was the kind of weight you feel when you're about to see the final shape of a decision you can't undo. Dana hadn't eaten. Hadn't showered. Just slipped into jeans and a sweater like armor, keys in hand before her sister even woke up. The drive was slow. Not because of traffic, but because every turn felt like a countdown. This wasn't a confrontation. It was an autopsy. She parked farther down the block this time. No need to draw attention. Her old routine would have had her in heels, sunglasses, trying to control the scene before it started. But today she just needed answers. Something to explain how the man she thought was built from compromise had turned into a goddamn ghostwriter of her eviction. The front gate was open. The garden, her garden, looked better than it ever did under her care. The hedges were trimmed. Flowers blooming that she couldn't name. The kind of beauty that didn't scream for attention. Just was. And there they were. Anna, kneeling beside a flower bed, dirt on her gloves, straw hat tilted just so. Marcus stood beside her, holding a watering can like it belonged in his hand. They weren't touching. Weren't even looking at each other. But they were synced in a way Dana hadn't been with him in years. No performance. Just peace. Anna laughed at something he said. A real laugh. Full-bodied. Confident. The kind of laugh Dana hadn't earned in months. Dana's voice cracked before she even reached them. You moved her in? Marcus looked up. Calm. The same expression he used when checking a receipt or setting a thermostat. Not cold. Not kind. Just done. She signed the lease, he said. Pause. Same way you signed off your place in my life. Dana felt her knees soften. You planned this? A small pause. A breath. A glance that wasn't sharp. Just final. No, he said, and turned back to the garden. I prepared. 3 words. And just like that, the house, the life, the years, it all folded. Not in fire. Not in fury. In distance. Anna stood. Brushed her gloves off. Looked at Dana not with pity, but with restraint. She knew. She knew the history, the pain, the ghost of marriage lingering between them, but she didn't flinch. Didn't step back. She didn't have to. She'd been chosen through silence. Through design. Dana wanted to scream. To cry. To say something sharp, cutting, memorable. But all she could manage was a whisper pathetic and small. She's boring. Marcus didn't even look up. You said that once, he replied. Right before I realized, boring stays. He turned then. Only halfway. Enough to meet her eyes. No rage. No regret. You made your move, he said. And with that, he turned back toward the garden. Toward the woman she once mocked, now pulling weeds from the soil of a life Dana never bothered to tend. Dana stood there, shrinking by the second, in a home that no longer remembered her name. Not lost. Erased. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just settle. It smothers. When Paul walked out that door, it wasn't dramatic. No slammed fists. No raised voice. No broken plates or theatrical exits. It was worse. Colder. Surgical. The kind of silence that only happens when something is truly over, and everyone in the room knows it, but doesn't dare admit it yet. He didn't go far. Just out the front door and down the walk he'd shoveled every winter, past the yard he'd landscaped with his own 2 hands. Right by the porch swing, he hung for Dana on their 5th anniversary. The swing she never used. The wind bit through his coat, but he didn't speed up. There was no reason to rush anymore. Inside the house, no one followed. No one even called after him. Dana didn't flinch. Riley was too busy cackling with her aunt, like it was the punchline of a sitcom and not the end of a man's role in their lives. Back at the table, the envelope just sat there. White. Thick. Weighted with the kind of finality none of them expected from Paul. They thought they knew him. Passive, predictable Paul. The ATM with a pulse. The man who paid but never asked. Who smiled through being the butt of the joke. Who stayed late to fix Riley's car when her real dad didn't even remember her birthday. They never thought he'd leave. Especially not like that. 3 hours later, the turkey had gone cold, the wine had stopped flowing, and the room that once echoed with smug laughter now felt too quiet. Riley finally picked up the envelope. Rolled her eyes. What's this? A speech? A poem? She didn't open it. She just tossed it onto the side table, next to the unread magazines and takeout menus. Like it was junk mail. Dana didn't ask. She didn't care. She figured he'd be back. He always came back. And even if he didn't, well, the house was hers now, wasn't it? Except it wasn't. But that truth hadn't landed yet. Paul didn't go to a hotel. He didn't sleep in his car. He went exactly where they'd never think to look, the guest unit above the garage. A space he'd renovated himself, registered under a quiet LLC they never paid attention to. It had its own entrance, utilities, and most importantly, its own title, bought in his name only. Years ago, while Riley was still in high school, Paul had started planning. Not because he expected betrayal, but because he knew it was only a matter of time before the cracks they kept painting over turned into fractures they couldn't hide. Back then, it started small. Side comments from Dana about how men used to be. Passive digs at how Paul wasn't ambitious, like her ex, though that man owed more in back taxes than most people earned in a year. Then came Riley's grown-up attitude, suddenly too cool, too sharp-tongued, the kind of arrogance you only get when you're old enough to be cruel and young enough to think you're untouchable. But Paul wasn't blind or deaf. He was just patient. He'd spent his career in logistics, moving things quietly, making complex systems look easy. He knew how to build redundancies, hide backup plans in plain sight, and make a flawless exit while the others were still working out where the doors were. So when Riley mocked him in front of 10 people, when she raised that glass, smirked across the room, and thanked her mother for putting up with the loser who thinks he's my real dad, Paul didn't feel rage, not even shame. He felt release. Because that sentence wasn't just disrespect. It was witness disrespect. And that triggered Clause R. The very clause Dana had signed 2 years ago, sitting across from him in her robe with a glass of Pinot in hand, flipping through documents she didn't care to read. Just tell me where to sign, she'd said. So he had. He'd told her exactly where. She thought it was a refinance on the mortgage, some bureaucratic shuffle for better rates. Paul didn't lie. He just let her assume. It was a financial update. Technically. And now legally. It was the noose they had both agreed to. She just hadn't realized she was the one putting her head through the loop. By the time Riley opened the envelope, when she finally did open it, it would be too late. Because that night, while they drank and laughed and toasted to each other's smugness, Paul met with a man named Malcolm Pierce. A quiet man. A man who didn't ask why Clause R existed. Just if it had been triggered. Paul said nothing. Just handed over a recording. A video, actually. From his phone. Sitting in his jacket pocket. Crystal clear audio of Riley's little toast. Malcolm listened. Nodded once. That'll do. No fanfare. No legalese. Just 3 words. Because the clause wasn't theoretical. It was active. Triggered the moment her voice hit the air and the others laughed. The moment Paul was publicly mocked in his own home by someone financially dependent on him in front of witnesses. Witnesses who would be receiving notarized affidavits in the mail by Monday. Paul didn't want to fight anymore. He didn't need Dana to understand. He didn't care if Riley ever respected him. He just wanted the house back. The house he bought. The one they thought they inherited by proximity. And now? It was already in motion. Utilities were transferred. Access codes reset. The deed re-recorded under the clause. Clause R. Simple, brutal, brilliant. And Paul went to bed in the unit over the garage, lit a fire, poured himself a small bourbon, and turned off his phone. Across the driveway, his name was still on the mailbox. But soon, theirs wouldn't be. The Monday after Thanksgiving, Dana posted a filtered photo of leftover pie on Instagram with the caption, "Not even family drama can ruin good dessert." Smiley face. Autumn leaves. #blessed. To the casual viewer, everything looked fine, festive, even. No one would have guessed her husband had vanished without so much as a slammed door. She told her sister Paul was just sulking. She told Riley he was probably at a friend's. But by Tuesday, when his phone still went straight to voicemail and the Wi-Fi password no longer worked, she started to notice little shifts. Nothing big, just gaps. The garage opener on her keyring didn't work. The smart thermostat locked her out. Riley couldn't stream anything from Netflix. It asked for the primary account holder's verification code. When she called Paul's work to casually check in, HR said he'd taken personal leave. Indefinite. That word stuck in her head like a bad lyric. But Dana wasn't panicked. Not yet. In her mind, This was Paul doing what Paul did best, brooding in silence. He'd come back. They always came back. Because women like Dana knew how to play the long game. Keep the house warm, the wine chilled, and the story rehearsed. What she didn't know, what she refused to imagine, was that Paul wasn't reacting. He was executing. While she was plating leftovers and deleting passive-aggressive comments from Riley's Thanksgiving toast clip on Facebook, which she had posted herself, by the way, Paul was across town in a beige conference room with a man named Malcolm Pierce. The room smelled like printer toner and quiet judgment. Paul didn't take off his coat. He didn't sit back. He just handed over the manila folder and said, "It's time." Malcolm didn't blink. Klazar, Paul nodded. Malcolm opened the folder, revealing documents that had been signed, notarized, and silently filed over the past 18 months. Not all at once. Little by little. Amended trust language. Contingency transfers. Beneficiary reversals. Property reallocations. All legal. All enforceable. All built like a dam waiting for a whisper of rain. And the rain had come. "Let's walk through the sequence," Malcolm said, flipping through tabs like a conductor preparing to cue an orchestra. Primary residence, transferred to revocable trust 311B. Utility accounts already shifted. Deed updated as of last quarter. Pension lock triggered via Klazar. And here, he paused. Here's the fun part. Paul raised an eyebrow. Per your instructions, we're also activating the sunset clause on all discretionary financial support, tuition, auto insurance, credit cards. Everything you've been quietly covering. Done, Paul said. Done, Malcolm echoed. Riley's car? Technically leased under the LLC tied to Paul's consulting firm. Dana's gym membership? Paid annually on the card she never saw. Health insurance? Switched back to individual plans starting January 1st. They'd never noticed. Paul was boring that way. Useful that way. Invisible. Until he wasn't. Malcolm pushed a small black envelope across the table. "This is for her." Paul took it. Heavy. Sealed. Wax stamped like something out of a movie. Inside, a cover letter, a printout of her own signature on the trust amendment, and one very cold sentence in bold. Disrespect need not be violent to be permanent. Paul didn't smile. He just nodded. The drive back wasn't long, but it was quiet. Too quiet for music. Too purposeful for distractions. He took the back roads, past the park where Riley used to play, where Dana used to pretend to take interest in his weekend grilling obsession. All of it felt like someone else's memories. When he got back to the guest unit above the garage, he lit the fire again. Same bourbon, same chair. But this time, he held the envelope in his lap a little longer. Studied the wax. The weight. Then, calmly, he walked across the driveway at midnight. The house was dark. Dana's car in the driveway. Riley's headlights off. Silence inside. He left the envelope on the foyer table, right under the photo of their wedding. One Dana refused to replace, not out of sentiment, but laziness. Then he left, not in a blaze, not with regret, with precision. By the time Dana would wake up and see the black envelope, by the time she'd tear it open, scoffing at what she assumed was another dramatic moment, Paul's name would already be removed from every shared account. His access to the security system? Terminated, yes. But more importantly, theirs was revoked. Because Paul wasn't trying to teach them a lesson. He wasn't trying to win. He was simply erasing himself from their lives so efficiently, so thoroughly, that one day they'd look around and ask, did he ever really exist here? And somewhere far from that house, in a place they never bothered to visit, Paul would be sipping coffee and reading the paper. Not bitter, not triumphant, just gone. Exactly as planned. It happened in the fall, 2 years before Thanksgiving collapsed under its own weight. Paul had come home early from a site visit, the kind of day where traffic and silence felt interchangeable. He parked the car out front instead of the garage, quietly let himself in through the side door, and heard Riley's voice echoing off the kitchen tile. "Please," she laughed into her phone, her tone dripping with practiced sarcasm. "He's not my real dad. He's just there. Pays for stuff. Mom says he's too soft to leave. It's basically free rent." Paul froze. He wasn't supposed to hear that. That wasn't for him. That was the kind of cruelty reserved for friends on the phone, safe from consequences. A private performance of dismissal and disdain. He could have cleared his throat, stepped in, slammed a cabinet just to make her jump. But he didn't. He stood there, out of sight, and listened. And something inside him didn't just crack. It calcified. When Riley hung up and walked past the doorway, still scrolling, Paul didn't look at her. He didn't offer his usual, "Hey, kiddo." He walked up the stairs, past the hallway photos, vacations he paid for, birthdays he planned, and sat at his desk. It was time. Paul had always prided himself on knowing when to plan. He didn't panic. Panic was for amateurs. Planning was for survivors. And he'd survived worse than this. Greedy clients, company mergers, cutthroat politics. But nothing had ever felt as personal, as humiliating, as hearing the child he'd raised, not out of obligation, but out of choice, reduce him to an ATM with a pulse. He opened his laptop, pulled up the trust. The family living trust had been something he'd put together years ago, in that optimistic haze of, "we're building a future together." He remembered the first version, clean, hopeful, everyone included, benefits arranged, careful provisions for Riley, even a clause for Dana's aging mother, in case she needed assisted living support. He stared at the screen for a long time, then began typing. It wasn't grand. It wasn't vengeful. It was precise. A single paragraph. Short, cold, legal. In the event the grantor is publicly humiliated, mocked, or disparaged by any beneficiary, verbally or non-verbally, in the presence of others or captured in any form of media or witness statement, the offending party forfeits all rights to shared assets, residuary interests, and support previously outlined herein. This provision is effective retroactively to the date of the original trust creation and shall be irrevocable. He sat back, read it over, then smiled. Clause R. He printed it out, filed it behind the other documents, slept like a man who had just locked a fire extinguisher behind glass. Not out of paranoia, but preparedness. 2 weeks later, he approached Dana at breakfast. She was skimming through a home decor magazine, making mental notes of furniture she'd never pay for. The toaster clicked up her sourdough. Paul slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" she mumbled, not looking up. Updated paperwork. Refinancing forms. She signed page after page while sipping coffee, stopping only to ask, "Do I really have to initial all these?" He nodded. "Yeah. New requirements since last year's rate change." He didn't lie, just didn't elaborate. Clause R sat on page 12, bottom left corner, in 10-point font, directly beneath a paragraph about community property protections. Dana initialed it with a red pen. It felt absurdly easy. But that's the thing about people who think you're soft. They underestimate not just your strength, but your memory. They assume you're too gentle to document the insults, too loving to plan an escape, too scared to let go. Paul wasn't scared. He was waiting. And from that day forward, everything changed. He stopped including Riley in his tax planning, stopped paying for her car maintenance in advance, converted the joint checking account into 2 separate household expense trackers, and automated transfers in amounts that looked generous but were actually limits. Not freedom. He hired a financial advisor who specialized in pre-divorce asset reshuffling, quietly moved Dana off his healthcare plan onto her own, said it was better coverage for her needs. She bought it. Of course she did. He stopped arguing. Let her win little battles. Where to vacation, what color to paint the kitchen, who to invite to the Labor Day party. Because he knew none of it mattered. The house she redecorated, owned by the trust. The remodel she bragged about, paid through a shell account tied to his consulting work, listed as an investment in temporary residence. The garage unit, titled under a holding company in Nevada, fully insulated, legally separate. And Riley? The girl who once called him dad when she scraped her knee, who cried into his shirt when her first boyfriend dumped her. She had no idea that the man she mocked was quietly pulling the oxygen from their little ecosystem. One clause at a time. He stopped needing them to love him. He only needed them to talk. And he knew, deep down, they always would. Because the thing about people who think they own the room, they always forget the walls have ears. Paul just built his escape inside those walls. With signatures. And silence. The first time Malcolm Pierce met Paul, he misjudged him. Not in a cruel way. just in the way most people misjudge quiet men in decent clothes with no urgent requests. Paul had walked in with a leather folio, not a sob story. He didn't fidget, didn't rant, just asked for a consultation on an amendment to his existing living trust. Something precise, he'd said. Not reactive. Strategic. Malcolm, a man whose client base was 70% men blindsided by divorce and 30% women planning to trap their future ex, leaned forward. What exactly are we looking to protect? Paul had paused, then slid over a sheet of paper. Typed. Clean. Centered. Clause R. Malcolm read it once, then again, and smiled. Unusual clause, he said finally. But enforceable. Paul didn't blink. That's all I need. Malcolm took off his glasses. May I ask, what's the trigger? Paul folded his hands. Disrespect. Public. Witnessed. Malcolm leaned back, fingers steepled. Infidelity clauses are shaky. Morality ones even more. But this? He tapped the paper. It's surgical. You're not moralizing. You're documenting conditions for asset retention. Paul nodded. I don't want revenge. Just dignity. Exactly. Over the next 4 weeks, they built a system. Not just a trust. A framework. Each part a trapdoor with no warning labels. The primary residence, placed into a revocable trust titled Palisade Holdings. Dana's name had never been on the deed, but now it wasn't even on the conversation. That trust had its own successor trustees, one of whom was a former Army buddy of Paul's who now worked in real estate law in Wyoming. The car Dana drove? Technically part of the lifestyle expenses reserve, funded through quarterly bonuses that no longer existed. The mortgage? Already paid off. And the utilities? Shifted, rerouted, prepaid into an escrow account that would be triggered upon Paul's withdrawal of authorization. Think of it like a demolition sequence, Malcolm said one afternoon, sliding 2 folders across the polished oak table in his office. One folder was navy blue, the other, charcoal gray. Exit. Ignition. Paul raised an eyebrow. Malcolm smirked. Exit gives them 30 days. Quietly. Paid relocation, short-term housing voucher, 3 months health premiums. Basically a parachute. Ignition is no parachute. Paul tapped the navy one. This comes first. Malcolm nodded. When? Paul glanced at his watch. Soon. Then he picked up the gray one. And this? Malcolm pushed over a small sealed envelope. That's yours to decide. When the situation becomes irretrievable. Paul didn't open it. He left it sealed. Because he knew something Malcolm didn't. He wouldn't need to light the match. He just had to let them keep talking. Let them keep treating him the way they always had. As background noise. As a convenience. As that placeholder man who paid for things, nodded on cue, and took the emotional leftovers. So that's exactly what he did. He left Malcolm's office that day in silence. Drove through the long route home. Past the florist Riley never acknowledged. Past the bookstore where Dana once claimed she loved reading, but hadn't finished a single novel in years. Past the dog park they'd never taken a dog to. When he got home, the TV was on. Riley was shouting at her phone over some online order issue. Dana was deep into a wine buzz, gossiping with her sister about how Paul's been so weird lately. Probably a phase. He ate dinner, listened, watched, and waited. Because Paul didn't need them to slip. He needed them to be themselves. Themselves was enough. Every snide comment. Every joke made at his expense. Every time Riley sighed and rolled her eyes when he offered to help. Every moment Dana pretended to listen while actually texting. They were the architects of their own collapse. Paul, he was just the building inspector. And soon, he'd issue the notice. Structure condemned. Occupants notified. Evacuation pending. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't tighten his fists. He just waited. Behind calm eyes. Because when people believe you're powerless, they don't hide their venom. They pour it. And Paul had already placed the buckets. The house creaked the way old houses do in late November. Dry air settling between drywall and foundation. Pipes groaning like distant ghosts. Paul knew every sound by heart. The way Dana's footsteps fell heavy on the upstairs landing after her 3rd glass of red. The tick of Riley's acrylic nails as she scrolled through her phone in the dark. The faint hum of the dishwasher finishing a cycle no one ever thanked him for loading. It was 2:17 a.m. when Paul stood in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at the hallway like a man about to commit a robbery. He wasn't taking anything, just leaving everything, which, in this case, felt worse, more precise, more brutal. The bag at his feet was small. One change of clothes, a travel razor, 2 books, his passport, not because he planned to flee the country, but because it symbolized the only kind of freedom they'd never grant him unless he took it himself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the house key. Brass, worn, familiar. He didn't place it on the counter. That would have been visible, dramatic. Instead, he walked quietly into the living room, where Riley had dropped her purse and phone after whatever half-assed Friendsgiving she'd attended earlier that evening. Her makeup wipes still sat unopened beside an empty LaCroix can. There was a used napkin with lipstick on it, tossed like the room owed her something. He slipped the key under her phone. Then, from the inner pocket of his coat, he pulled out a single-page document. Clean, laser-printed. No signatures needed. It had been filed, notarized, and legally executed weeks ago. At the top, amendment to trust, clause or activation and asset severance. Riley's name was underlined in red. A sticky note in Paul's handwriting sat attached. You wanted to be sure I wasn't your dad. Now you are. He placed it beside the key. That was enough. No goodbye, no confrontation, no lecture. Just a man choosing subtraction over escalation. He stepped out the front door without so much as the click of a latch. Walked around the side of the house, past the frostbitten flower beds Dana had once promised to replant. Past the trash cans Riley never remembered to roll out on Thursdays. Past the garage with the broken motion light. He climbed the back stairwell quietly, opened the side entrance. The guest apartment was exactly as he left it 3 weeks ago, after staging it with all the essentials. A new mattress, linens, spare laptop, a folder labeled ignition in the desk drawer, just in case. The Wi-Fi was already on. Utilities paid for 6 months in advance. Refrigerator stocked. It smelled of cedar and readiness. He exhaled, not in relief, in control. Paul lit a fire in the small wood stove, took off his coat, sat in the armchair he'd bought secondhand and reupholstered himself, something Dana called a waste of time for a chair no one will sit in. He sat in it now, and he slept. Not lightly, not restlessly, but fully, deeply, the kind of sleep that doesn't come from exhaustion, but finality. The next morning, while the house below stirred with coffee and tension, while Dana reheated pies and rehearsed smiles, and Riley rehearsed more insults she thought were clever, Paul remained above it all, literally. Unseen, unbothered. He heard her pacing, heard the shriek when she found the key and the paper, heard Dana's voice shift from sleepy irritation to snapping disbelief. But he didn't go down. He didn't answer. He was just a ghost in the rafters now, invisible by design. Later that day, Riley would joke in front of extended family that Paul had a meltdown over a joke, so dramatic, unaware that the deed had already shifted. The utilities were already redirecting, and the locks would soon whisper closed behind them. Paul didn't need to slam doors. He just had to walk through them, alone. The night before Thanksgiving, Paul didn't just leave. He disappeared on purpose, and no one noticed until it was already too late. Riley didn't open the envelope on Thanksgiving. She was too busy curating outrage for Instagram, posting aesthetic shots of mashed potatoes she didn't make, calling Paul's quiet exit a weird midlife thing, and assuring her followers that she was unbothered, thriving, and so grateful for my real family. But by Friday afternoon, the cracks were showing. The Wi-Fi was down. Riley couldn't get online. She accused a router, then the modem, then Comcast. She even tried rebooting the smart TV 3 times before realizing it wasn't the connection, it was the account. The family Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Disney Plus, and Spotify all gave the same message. Primary user has deactivated this device. She stormed through the house in her oversized hoodie and sock-covered feet, shouting, "Why the hell is nothing working?" Dana, meanwhile, was dealing with her own disturbance. She'd tried to order groceries with the household visa and received a transaction decline. Twice. Temporary hold by account owner, it said. She shrugged it off, figured Paul had frozen the card to prove some kind of petty point. He'll come crawling back, she told herself. He always does. But something about the silence in the house, the strange stillness of a place once quietly managed by a man they never credited, was starting to feel off. Like a rhythm was missing. And then Riley saw it again. The envelope, still sitting on the side table like a forgotten library book. Untouched. Innocuous. She grabbed it with the disdain of someone expecting a handwritten guilt trip and tore it open with one hand while tapping her phone with the other. But as the content spilled out, her scrolling stopped. The first thing she saw was a sticky note. Yellow, slanted, with her name in all caps and Paul's handwriting, clean and unmistakable. You don't owe me respect, but you also don't get the roof. Below it, a formal letter printed on thick paper. To Riley, redacted. Effective immediately, the following actions have been taken. Revocation of dependent access to all trust-linked benefits. Immediate termination of all utility accounts under the Palisade Holdings Residential Trust. Nullification of discretionary support, including vehicle maintenance and lifestyle accounts. Reclassification of resident status to non-beneficiary guest, pending 30-day courtesy exit. Her stomach dropped. She flipped to the next page, a copy of the trust. There it was in black and white, clause R underlined, with footnotes referencing both her behavior and the time-stamped toast from Thanksgiving. The final page listed accounts already withdrawn or frozen. She sat on the couch, phone now dangling in her lap, face blank. Then, M.O.M., she shrieked. Dana came in holding a wine glass, exasperated. What now? He shut off the house, Mom. Like legally. He pulled the plug on everything. Dana laughed. What are you talking about? Riley shoved the trust toward her. Read it. Dana rolled her eyes, skimmed the document, and her face changed. Slowly, like a train watching the track disappear beneath it. Then she walked to the drawer where the mortgage documents were kept, pulled them out. There, in neat legal print, the house wasn't under Paul and Dana Taylor. It was under Palisade Holdings Revocable Trust, sole grantor, Paul Taylor. No mention of her name. Not as co-owner. Not even as trustee. Dana stared at the document, her fingers going cold. That can't be right. It's his house, Riley said, her voice cracking with something between anger and dread. He didn't leave us, Mom. He evicted us. For the first time in years, Dana didn't have a sarcastic reply. No shrug. No insult. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows a bomb detonation. Not because the bomb was loud, but because it changed the shape of everything. Riley stood up, pacing now. What do we do? Call him? Threaten him? Sue. Dana's hand hovered over her phone, but she didn't move. She was rereading the trust again and again, like the outcome might shift if she just squinted hard enough. She saw her own initials, every page. Tiny red ink. Her own handwriting. Proof she had signed, willingly, every document Paul put in front of her. Probably while watching TV. Probably while distracted. Probably after saying, just tell me where. Now she knew where. Right off a cliff. And Paul. He wasn't answering his phone. He wasn't posting cryptic messages. He wasn't outside, waiting for a fight. He was gone. Legally. Cleanly. Irrevocably. They hadn't just lost him. They'd lost the roof, the leverage, the upper hand, and the illusion that they were always one step ahead. All because Riley couldn't keep her mouth shut. And Dana never read the fine print. Dana wasn't the type to admit defeat. Not even when it knocked politely on her front door, handed her a notarized trust revocation, and took the thermostat with it. She was raised on the belief that nothing was ever truly final if you complained with enough confidence. So when she realized the power wasn't in her name, the mortgage wasn't in her name, the Wi-Fi, the car insurance, even the garbage collection, not in her name, she did what she'd always done. She called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Neil Sandon. The same Neil who'd helped her sister bleed her ex-husband dry in court. The same Neil who once bragged over drinks about a divorce settlement so vicious he had to replace his office locks. He wore cowboy boots with his suits and answered calls with "Talk to me." She liked that. Neil came over Monday morning in a black BMW and aviators, holding a leather briefcase that looked like it hadn't aged a day since 1997. They sat in the dining room. Dana with a glass of water she didn't drink, Neil with the documents Riley had printed in a panic. Clause R. The trust amendments. The deed filings. The utilities termination. The withdrawal notices. It was all there. Too much paper, too neatly organized. That was the first red flag. Neil didn't say much for the first 20 minutes. Just flipped, grunted occasionally, circled a paragraph here, underlined a clause there. Dana tried to read his face, but Neil was built for poker and depositions. His eyebrows never moved. Finally, he looked up. When did you sign this? She blinked. I don't know. Sometime last year. He said it was refinancing, better rate on the mortgage. Neil just stared. I mean, I signed a lot of stuff, she added, voice growing defensive. We've been married 14 years. I trusted him. Neil leaned back. Did you read it? Of course she stopped. I skimmed. Did you have it reviewed? I didn't think I needed to. Neil nodded slowly, folded the last document, and pulled out his phone. Who are you calling? Paul's lawyer. Wait now. But Neil was already dialing. Paul's attorney, Malcolm Pierce, answered on the second ring. This is Malcolm. Neil Sandon. I've got your paperwork in front of me, regarding the Taylor Trust revocation and asset severance. I have a simple question. Did your client's wife sign this knowingly? There was a pause on the line. Then Malcolm said, evenly, she initialed every page. It's on file with the county recorder. Timestamped. Witnessed. Another pause. Then Neil said, all right. That's all I needed. He hung up. Dana leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Well, Neil put the phone down, took off his glasses. Dana, you're a guest in a house that no longer considers you family. Her mouth fell open. That's it. That's it. I paid for things. Nothing that's traceable. I picked the tile in the kitchen. Congratulations. You're supposed to fight for me. I'm supposed to win cases, not wrestle ghosts. She stood up so fast the chair scraped hard against the hardwood. There has to be a loophole, she said, pacing now. A mistake. A missed signature. A typo. Something. Neil gathered the papers, slid them back into his briefcase. There was a loophole, he said. You walked right through it when you assumed you could keep disrespecting the man paying the bills. You're blaming me? I'm stating facts. She stopped, seething. So what now? Neil stood. Now? You can negotiate, politely. Maybe he'll give you time. Maybe a stipend. Maybe not. But if you're asking whether you can overturn any of this in court. He shook his head. Not without looking like a woman who publicly ridiculed her husband, signed away every right she had, and didn't even read the paperwork. Dana sank into the chair, her whole body suddenly too heavy for rage. Neil adjusted his cufflinks. I'll invoice you by the end of the week. Is that it? He paused at the door. Dana, if I may, he said, turning halfway. You played checkers against a man who builds chessboards for fun. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a slow roast. He marinated this for years. And then he left. She sat alone, the envelope open in front of her, the air around her still and cold. It was only then that Dana realized. Paul hadn't gotten lucky. He'd gotten ready. It was a Tuesday morning, cold and gray, the kind of day where even the sunlight looked tired. The kind of day that offered no warmth, just clarity. The text Dana received was short, professional. Meeting. Wednesday, 11 a.m. 6th and Ashton, Keller and Rowe Real Estate Office. RSVP not required. No salutation. No signature. But she knew exactly who sent it. And for once, she didn't reply with sarcasm or threats. She just stared at the screen until Riley leaned over her shoulder and muttered, "What does he want now?" Dana didn't answer. Because she didn't know. She arrived at the office in heels too high for cold tile and a coat that still smelled faintly of the last Thanksgiving Paul had paid for. Riley trailed behind her, in yoga pants and attitude, chewing gum like it owed her rent. They were led into a sleek, sterile conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and zero warmth. Paul was already sitting there. Calm. Crisp. Not smug. Just resolved. He didn't stand to greet them. Didn't even say hello. Instead, he slid 2 manila envelopes across the polished glass table. Dana raised an eyebrow. What is this? More of your little stunts. No, Paul said simply. Just logistics. She opened the envelope with that same bored flourish she used when flipping through junk mail. But inside wasn't junk. It was everything. Lease agreement for a furnished apartment across town. Utility setup instructions. A check covering 30 days living expenses. A printed list of local job placement services. And at the very top, a set of apartment keys on a generic silver ring. Dana blinked. You arranged a rental? Paul nodded. For 30 days. Everything's covered. Her voice cracked into a brittle laugh. Are you serious? Deadly. And after that? Paul folded his hands. After that, you'll need your own plan. The sentence hit her like wind she hadn't braced for. She tried to recover with indignation. I gave you years of my life. And I gave you everything else, Paul replied. Even after I realized you never stopped treating me like the second best option who pays first. Riley, arms folded, snorted. You're acting like some kind of king now. Just because you played us with a bunch of paperwork. Paul turned to her, eyes colder than the December wind outside. You were never my daughter. The words landed sharp. He didn't say them with cruelty. He said them like truth. But I tried, he added, quietly. God knows I tried. Riley opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not mockery. Not sarcasm. Just silence. Because deep down, maybe she knew. Knew she pushed too far, too often. Knew he wasn't bluffing. Dana was still reeling, rifling through the pages, like some line in there would reverse time. This is humiliating. You're throwing us out like garbage. No, Paul said, rising now. I'm giving you the courtesy of 30 days. Most people don't get that. Especially not from someone they publicly mocked while eating food he paid for in a house he built. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed one final item on the table, a small flash drive. Labeled only. Our clause or trigger, 11.23, timestamp 5:17 p.m. Riley paled. Paul looked at her. I didn't ask you to love me. But respect? That was the bare minimum. He looked back at Dana. I was never your doormat, Dana. You just got used to me never wiping the dirt off. Then, with no dramatic pause, no flair, no final words, Paul turned and walked out. No eye contact. No backward glance. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. The kind of sound that told you something wasn't just over. It had been concluded. It was pouring outside. That slow, miserable kind of rain that doesn't cleanse, it soaks you in everything you've tried to outrun. Dana stood in the lobby of Paul's office building, dripping in a coat 2 seasons out of style and regret that was suddenly very much in vogue. No makeup. No posture. No mask. The receptionist didn't even ask who she was, just buzzed her through like the weight of her failure had a name badge. Paul didn't look surprised when she entered. He was behind his desk, calm as ever, reading a legal pad as if she hadn't shattered his home, his peace, his trust, and then tried to gaslight the ashes. She closed the door gently. No stomping. No dramatics. Just a woman bleeding from a wound no one else could see. I didn't come to fight, she said quietly. Paul set the pad down. Waited. We were a family, she whispered, almost choking on the words. He didn't flinch. Dana took a step forward, but it felt like a mile. You were always so steady. So boringly loyal. I thought, she faltered. I thought I could bend things without breaking them. Still nothing from Paul. Just that unreadable stillness. That terrifying surgical restraint. I wasn't trying to destroy you, she said. I was just tired of feeling like a guest in my own life. You weren't a guest, Paul replied. You were the homeowners association. Constant complaints. No investment. She sank into the chair across from him. No rehearsed lines left. No vanity. Just naked desperation. I'm not here to ask for money, she said. I just don't want you to hate me. After everything. Paul reached into his desk drawer. Took out a large envelope. Sealed. Heavy. He slid it across the desk. She stared at it. What's this? She asked, her voice already trembling. He tapped the top of the envelope once. The final clause. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a printout. Several pages. Legal language. Her signature. Dated. Notarized. Pension waiver. Section 4. B.1. All claim to the grantor's retirement fund and/or pension shall be permanently forfeited in the event that the grantor is subject to verbal, recorded, or publicly witnessed disparagement by any dependent party, including but not limited to spouse or legal partner. A copy of the video transcript of Riley's Thanksgiving toast was stapled to the back. Dana stared at it like it was written in another language. I didn't see this clause, she said softly. You signed it the week after my birthday, Paul said. You were annoyed I made you fill out so many forms. You didn't read them. She swallowed hard. But this is everything. No, he said. This is what's mine. She looked up, eyes glossy. Paul, I made mistakes. No. You made a system, he said. Mistakes are accidents. You were consistent. I never cheated. You never had to. Dana's breath hitched. You're really cutting me out completely? Paul leaned forward now. First time he moved with any intent since she arrived. You cut me out. Every day. Word by word. Sarcasm by sarcasm. Joke by joke. Riley didn't get that attitude from nowhere, Dana. She watched you dismiss me in slow motion for a decade. And now, he gestured at the envelope. That's just math catching up to disrespect. She held the papers in her lap like something radioactive. Please, she said, her voice cracking. I don't want to start over at my age. Paul's eyes were soft. Not warm, but not cruel. Then maybe you shouldn't have erased the man who built the life you didn't want to restart. She sat there a while. The room felt colder now. More real. After a moment, she stood. She didn't beg again. Didn't cry louder. She just walked to the door. Before she left, she turned. One last time. I did love you, you know. Paul looked at her. No, Dana. You just loved the man who wouldn't leave. And now that he had, there was nothing left for her to stand on. The sky was a dull pewter gray that Christmas morning. No snow, no sparkle, just that bone-deep cold that made even silence feel sharp. Dana and Riley pulled up to the house in silence, parked at an awkward angle like they still had some claim to space. The yard looked different. Cleaner. Trimmed. No bags of Riley's forgotten clothes on the porch. No holiday lights. Just one perfectly hung wreath on the front door, green and gold, simple ribbon. And beneath it, taped like a quiet bomb, was a folded letter and a manila envelope. Riley saw it first. Is this a joke? Dana stepped forward. Read the note. New owners move in January 2nd. Kindly vacate. Paul. Her hand trembled. He sold the house. Riley snatched the envelope, tore it open. Inside. Certified sale agreement. Signed and executed. Final payout document from Keller and Rowe Realty. Notification of asset transfer. Full proceeds moved to the Paul Taylor Veterans Legacy Trust. Beneficiary, educational and housing programs for children of deceased veterans. Not a cent for Dana. Not a refund for Riley's car. Not even a footnote of acknowledgement. Just silence. Is this legal? Riley snapped, shoving the paper back at her mother like it burned. Dana didn't respond. She was still staring at the name on the trust. Not hers. Not theirs. Just Paul's. They stood there on the porch, two women who had always assumed the world bent if they leaned hard enough. That people like Paul, quiet, sturdy, forgiving, were permanent structures. Turns out, he was a contractor. And the contract had expired. Dana rang the doorbell anyway. Out of reflex. Out of desperation. No answer. The locks had already been changed. Riley kicked the door in frustration. I can't believe he'd do this. After everything. After everything we did, Dana murmured. Riley looked at her, startled. What? Dana didn't repeat it. Didn't need to. Because in her chest, somewhere below the pride, below the arrogance, something was cracking open, and she didn't like what was coming out. Across the state, 3 hours north, Paul sat by a fireplace in a small rented cabin overlooking a frozen lake. Coffee. Silence. A book he wasn't reading. The flames popped quietly. No decorations. No guests. Just peace. He had made no announcements. No grand finale. He didn't need to. Everything had already unfolded exactly as designed. The house was sold. The proceeds weren't even routed through his personal accounts. He didn't want the money. He wanted it to matter more than they ever let him matter. Children who'd lost parents in uniform would now sleep under a roof he paid for. Meanwhile, Dana and Riley stood on the frozen porch of a home that had never truly been theirs, staring at a paper reminder that actions echo, and sometimes they echo into eviction. There was no phone call that morning. No text from Paul. No Merry Christmas or I hope you're okay. Just the memory of their laughter. I'm thankful for the loser who thinks he's my real dad. And the slow realization that their favorite punchline had quietly taken the stage back. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't begged. He hadn't even retaliated. He just let them build their little fire of disrespect. Then sold the house it was burning in. Merry Christmas.